Guys, so part 3 of this week's lesson is going to be a little bit different. I'm using a software called Screencastify. As you all know, I'm not a great artist, and so drawing some of these more complex figures was going to be kind of difficult for me, so I decided to give this software a try. I'm also using a new software on my Chromebook called Limnu, I think is how you pronounce it, and it's kind of like a whiteboard on the screen, and so hopefully this all works together and you can kind of understand what I'm doing. But as always, if you have questions, you can contact me, whatever you need. So far this week, we've learned about using blocks and counting in order to figure out the volume of a 3D figure. We've learned how to use the volume formula of length times width times height. And so now we're going to do what's called additive volume. And so additive volume is where you take this big complex figure and you break it up into smaller parts and figure out the volume of the smaller parts and then add them all together. So I'm going to do 2 examples and hopefully they make sense as I do it on the screen. So let's look at this shape. So if I see this shape, I see a taller part and then I see a shorter part. And so it would be really hard to figure out the volume of this whole shape without splitting it up into 2 separate parts. And so I'm going to split it right here, right down the middle. I'm going to make my pen a little bit thicker. So we're going to split it right there. That's still not very big. Oh well. And so first we're going to look at, I'm going to call this part A and I'm going to call this part B. And first we're going to look at the volume of part A. So I know that the height of part A is 8. I know that the width of part A is 4. And the length of part A is 5. And so I know that 4 times 5 is 20. And I can multiply 20 times 8. And 8 times 2 I know is 16, and I can add a 0. So part A is 160 feet cubed. Okay, so part A is 160 feet cubed. That one was pretty easy because we didn't really have to figure a lot out. Now, part B is going to get a little bit trickier because this tells us the length of this entire base, and we don't need the entire thing because we've already accounted for this part. And so I'll show you in just a second how to figure out what just that length is. So, part B, we know that the width is 4 feet and the height is 5 feet. So now we've just got to figure out what is the length. So if this whole thing is 12 feet, okay, and up here I see that all the way to here is 5 feet. So if the whole thing is 12 and 5 of the feet are accounted for, I would subtract 5 of them, and I got this 5 from right there. So I would subtract 5 feet and figure out that that is 7 feet. So this right here, this length is 7 feet. Oop, that is an ugly F. So I would have 4 times 5 times 7. So again, I can use my trick from up here. 4 times 5 is 20. Then I've got to multiply 20 times 7. I know that 7 times 2 is 14. And then I can add a 0. And so this part B, the volume is 140 feet cubed. Wonder if I can move this guy. Oh yeah, I can move him. Okay. So if I have the volume of part A and then the volume of part B, and I've got to put those two things together, I'm going to add them. That's where that additive volume comes in. So if I'm adding 160 plus 140, 0 plus 0 is 0. 6 plus 4 is 10. We got to regroup that 1. And then 3 ones equals 3. And so it looks like the volume of the whole thing all together is 300 feet cubed. So in our part 2 lesson, we talk about using the volume formula. So that's where all this base times length, or not base, length times width times height comes in. And so if you've not watched that one yet, I would encourage you to go back and watch that one before you watch this one, so that you know what's going on there. Like I told you in that video, if you want to build these things and build like 12 across and 8 up and 4 back, that's a really good idea. That way you can kind of see how all 3 work together. So using the volume formula, counting blocks, and that additive volume, putting them both together. But if you're comfortable with the math and comfortable with using the volume formula, then go ahead and just use that volume formula. Just make sure you're thinking about taking those things apart and figuring out the volume of one, the volume of another, and then putting the two together. So we're going to do one more example. I'm going to try to figure out if I can erase this whole page at one time. No, that doesn't work. Nope, it just says this. So how about we gonna move you. Gonna move. Can't move that. Hide tools. There we go. Oh, clearboard. Great. No, clearboard. Okay. So I'm going to bring in the image for the next one. Thank you for bearing with me. And you'll notice all these examples are going to be problems that you have in your work. So I'm trying to make your life as easy as possible, because I know there's a lot going on this week with all this volume stuff. Okay. So here's our figure. Again, we're going to have to split it into 2 different parts, because there's no way to figure out the volume of this figure without figuring out one part and then the other. So I'm going to split it. I know it's kind of hard to tell on this one, but I'm going to split it right here. And so I again have that, well, we could put a line here too. That would tell it. Yeah, there we go. So actually even better, you can really see that I've got a rectangle here and a rectangle here. So it looks like over here, we're again going to call it part A and part B. It looks like over here, they made my life really easy. I have a height, I have a width, and I have a length. And so I can say for part A, 5 times 5 times 15. Okay. So this is what I'm going to tell you so that I can explain why I'm doing the math the way I'm doing it. You might be tempted to quickly go, oh, 5 times 5 is 25, and then I can multiply 25 times 15. That's fine if you want to do it that way, but that then requires you to do 2-digit by 2-digit. And I want to save you from that. I want you to only have to do 2-digit by 1-digit or whatever. So I'm going to do 5 times 15 first, because we know that multiplication is commutative, that big word that means it doesn't mean what order it doesn't matter what order it goes in. So let's do 5 times 15 first. You all know I love to use a good box. So 5 times 10 is 50. 5 times 5 is 25. We can quickly in our head add that together and get 75. So now I again just have to do 2 digits by 1 digit. Because now I've got to do 75 times 5. Seven times 5 is 35. And we're going to add a 0. And then 5 times 5 is 25. And so again, you can quickly add that across to get 375. And so part A is 375 cubic feet. So now let's look at part B. It looks like we're going to be dealing with, oh, actually, no, they made your life super easy because they actually labeled the whole thing. Look at that. And even better, it looks like part B also has 15 times 5 times 5. Because we have that length, that height, and that width. Now, this length makes a lot of sense to me because like we looked at in the other one where we had to subtract, this whole thing back here is 20 feet, and it looks like we have 5 and 15. So that makes sense to me that 15 plus 5 would equal 20. Now, 15 times 5 times 5, does that look familiar? It looks familiar to me. 5 times 5 times 15, so we've already done that math. So part B actually is equal to 375 as well. So to figure out what the total volume is, we've got to add those together. Remember, that's why this is called additive volume. So 375 and 375, I could do one of two things, and you all would tell me this if we were in the classroom. I can add them together, or I can do 375 multiplied by 2. Whatever floats your boat, whatever you feel like doing. I'm going to add just for the sake of, it's called additive volume. I'm going to choose to add those together. But if you see that and go, well, I would just like to multiply it by 2, you go right ahead. 5 plus 5 is 10. We got to regroup that one. 0 here. 7 plus 7 is 14. Plus 1 is 15. I know some of you are filling in that blank like we do in class right along with me. And then 3 plus 3 is 6. Add 1 is 7. And so our total volume of the entire thing is going to be 750 cubic feet, or feet cubed. That's our answer to the whole thing. So hopefully this made sense. This is, like I said, totally new for me, using this type of software, but hopefully this made sense and was way better than me trying to draw these figures. Believe me, I tried and it did not go well. So let me know if you all have questions. Please watch this one last. You're going to need information from the other two in order to understand what's going on here. So if you watched it last, good for you. Happy working this week. I know you all are going to do great. Keep up the good work and let me know if you have questions.